Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Faitheism Project podcast. This is season 2, episode 23. We're calling it Fix It Now. My name is Alan Katz, and I've always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist that I'm fixed as now today.
And my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I am a pastor who is working outside of the church to help people outside of the church to go deeper inside of their faith. And it's good to be back with you again, Alan.
So you are, in your own way, you are helping them to fix it now.
That's right. That's right. I'm hoping those that find what I have to offer useful and helpful. I think I can help. And they, of course, always have to make the decision whether that's the way they want to go. But I think I can help. So, yep. Which, this whole topic is, in a broad sense, kind of what I'm trying to do through all that I'm doing. But
this is so very true. On our previous podcast, we having come back from a brief hiatus, we asked the question, what now? As we bumped into a country that was even more fractured than when we briefly went on hiatus. And it's getting hard to have civil conversations because of the increased fracturing. So as we both went to our respective corners in between podcasts, I came back with one idea, you came back with another. We're doing your idea, which I think is the better idea. Let's go there. But
that's very kind of you.
The idea that I had in mind, which I think it still kind of plays. We were thinking the same thing. We were coming at it from kind of different directions. What I had pitched was an idea. There's just a lot of talk about two Americas, the red America, blue America, and so my idea was, all right, let's go with the conceit for a second that we could create two places. All right, what would, if you could build a red America or blue America from the ground up, whatever America of your choice is, what would that place be? And then my thought was, all right, what if we could then, after describing what the ideal version of America would be, the other person would ask questions diplomatically as a visitor to this other country.
Yeah, kind of a, oh shoot, I just lost his name. Who was the guy that visited the U.S. Early on and his book still?
Of course, the French guy.
Starts with a T, right?
Talleyrand?
I am just blanking on his name.
God,
anyway,
no, not
kind of an updated version of that. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, I know exactly who you're thinking about. And
ALEXIS de Tocqueville.
It was the first European view of the Americans.
Yeah, which I've still seen cited in a number of places. I mean, people go back to that.
Plus ça change, as he might have said. Anyway,
so this would be kind of like combining that with science fiction, not in a bad way, in a good way, in the sense of, what would it be if everything became blue, or what would it be if everything became red, and then a visitor came from outside?
So it was really, and again, my idea was, all right, if everyone has an ideal, let's start with everyone's ideal and then negotiate in from the ideal. And so, hey, the point of you've made a great deal because everybody hates it.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that the point? So
that's a good compromise. Yeah.
Right. They're all so far removed from their principles that, whatever. But hey, that is how ultimately we used to muddle along. And if we can ever muddle along again, that is where we're going to have to do it from.
Yeah.
That same place, which is the point of the exercise of this podcast.
That's right.
Is really to, in the best of times, we demonstrate that two people coming from very, very different places, such as you and I, hey, if we talk about music, if we talk about movies, if we talk about TV shows, it's amazing how much we have in common. Mm-hmm. And hey, yes. that's like you're putting money into the bank account for the days when you have to have the harder conversations.
That's right.
About. That's right. You can still look back and go, well, hey, but we still have way more in common. These are important things, but we have the basis we really, really do on which to build coexistence.
And a future. You know, it's
yeah.
a future rather than a dystopia or something.
We both may dream of, oh, if we could just have the country of our dreams.
Right.
A red paradise via blue paradise. That it would solve all of our problems. It's probably not the case, but that was my idea for the intellectual exercise. But you pitched, let's go at it one. All right, what would be the major problem that perhaps these two entities are trying to solve more than any other problem? What's the big problem if you had to put one problem atop the massive pile of problems? Mm-hmm. Which one would sit atop the pile, which is Yertle the Turtle?
That's right.
Which is the Yertle the Turtle of our problems.
That's right. What's the Yertle?
And how do we deal with Yertle?
Yeah. That's right.
All right. So that is what we're doing today. It's either fix it now or what now, Yertle?
Yes. I like bringing in Yertle the Turtle. That was a favorite as a kid. So nice job.
I'm just trying to detoxify it as much as I possibly can. All right. So I think you should go first.
Well, all right. And this is, my big issue. I would say that the biggest problem we have right now is, well, I'm going to start with a story. As a pastor, I did premarital
That's
counseling.
Very pastor-like to have done what you just did. That little bait and switch, my friend.
That's right. As a pastor, I did a lot of premarital counseling with couples. And when I started as a pastor, I had a list of things that we'd talk about. We'd talk about with the couple that was engaged. We'd talk about finances. We'd talk about kids. We'd talk about money. We'd talk about all sorts of issues that have been known to cause difficulty for couples once they've kind of tied the knot. Over time, it started to dawn on me that really, rather than like a bunch of gatherings about a whole bunch of different issues kind of discussed at a surface level, there was really one issue that was the only issue that mattered, in my opinion, long-term. And that was whether the couple could communicate in a way that they could deal with problems and come up with a solution that they could both live with. That was it. So what I started doing after I realized this was, I'm going to meet with you same amount of times, but we're going to talk about different aspects of communication and work on, where you guys strong in communication, where some things maybe you haven't thought about, or what are some of the problem issues that you haven't been able to work through. Again, not to solve the problem issue, but to solve the how would you communicate with each other to the point that you come up with some kind of a solution and can move forward. So broadly, I would say our country's biggest problem is that we can't communicate our different viewpoints and come up with a solution that we can live with, which exactly what you were just talking about. But here's the part of it that I think, at least for me, is new. Maybe I'm just a slow learner, but for me, I think the number one reason that we're unable to communicate well is because the public sphere of our country has become sick. And what I mean by that, when I say public sphere, I'm talking about that part of modern life that, as far as I can tell with some philosophers that have looked into this and others, kind of in about the 1800s or so, this is when this stuff started to really develop, meaning there was a time we didn't have a public sphere like the one I'm going to describe. But the public sphere is that place where, as a nation, say, in our case, as a nation, we're having a conversation between people that know nothing about each other except the conversation that we're having, whether it's through media or social media or news or whatever. But we're having a conversation about macro issues with the whole country. And the idea is that you can have a space like that where everybody's talking about issues that relate to everybody and actually hear each other, reason through to a good solution. So, for example, that's why we have polling. Polling is asking the country, what do you think about this issue? And the assumption is that if we ask enough people in enough different areas and set it up in the right way, then we're going to find out what generally the nation thinks about something. And we take that as being read and we run with it. To me, that's the conversation that's really messed up in our society right now. And what's important about that is that there's a distinction between that public sphere conversation and everyday life locally on the ground. And in my opinion, everyday life locally on the ground isn't as sick as the public sphere in our country, but it's almost like the public sphere has COVID. And because we so believe that the public sphere is a reflection of what's going on in our local and everyday lives, that our local everyday lives are starting to catch COVID as well, more and more, because we treat each other, even in families and things, on the basis of these macro public sphere issues. And they're allowed to drive wedges between us in our conversations with one another. So I don't know, I'd love any feedback, Alan, because I'm kind of testing this out as I'm saying it, but I'd love any feedback from you on what makes sense or doesn't make sense about that. But it's just that I think, there's two realities going on. We want them to be reflecting each other, but I think they're different. And I think one of them is much more ill than the other. And so we've got to deal with why is it so ill at this level? And until we handle that, we're not going to be able to communicate in a way that we'll be able to get to the point that we talked about earlier, where we actually come up with something that we can all live with so that we can continue forward in a life we at least halfway want to live versus a reality where we're constantly anxious, angry, and worried about the future.
All right. It seems you want to inoculate quotidian life from the stuff out there, from the macro. If there was some way to insulate daily life from the larger issues.
No. So I'm not saying it right. What I want to do is somehow heal the public sphere.
The larger sphere.
Because it is messing up everyday life, quotidian life, because it's really messed up. And
why
people,
do you,
when they're in the public sphere, can treat each other in a way that at least for a while, you wouldn't treat each other when you actually see them face to face, but now it's starting to happen face to face as as.
Let me ask this. What is the relationship between the public sphere and the personal sphere?
It's highly dependent upon our belief that the public sphere truly and accurately reflects what's going on in everyday life in this country. Because we believe it to be true, we invest it with all sorts of power.
May I make this observation?
Sure.
You are talking about perception and believe it to be true. All right. What would cause anyone to believe anything to be true?
It's a wider issue of the way that we perceive our lives together.
But I'm asking just, all right, let's take it down to the very personal. What makes any person living their life believe things are true versus not true? I guess, all right, does not lived experience, is that not a teacher of some value to our daily lives? In
our daily lives, yes.
So lived experience.
In the public sphere, I'm not so sure.
No. I'm saying the personal sphere. So if someone sees in their lived experience ripples of the public sphere in their personal sphere, not because they've talked about it, but because things that happened in the public sphere, yeah, it's a bit like a tsunami, and we're like a little cove. Well, the tsunami is going to impact the cove, whether the cove likes it or not. The water will rise, and the water will come, and the water will hopefully recede someday.
But see, that's based on the assumption that the public sphere is real and the cove is not real. And my argument is the reverse. That really the cove is the most real. The public sphere doesn't actually reflect the future or anything, but what it does, it can have a huge impact on the everyday, for sure. I'm not doubting that. And my reason for that is, if you go back in history, there were actually times where people lived in smaller groupings without this conception of like a nation, for example. If you think nationalism is, one of the problems of the public sphere, because suddenly, let's take the Germans, suddenly Germany, which had multiple communities with multiple different, it was not homogenous. But they suddenly see themselves.
Well, Germany became fairly homogenous by the time, by the 1930s. They were no longer Visigoths and Ostrogoths.
Right, but part of that was because of this modern conception of the public sphere. That's part of what enabled that mindset to
yes
develop.
Indeed, yes. And the tribes became nations, and the nations,
right.
In his book Sapiens, Yuval Harari, he discusses that moment that you're kind of looking at when humans went from living in small clusters to larger entities that required more organization in order to live together. When we were hunter-gatherers living in groups, there's around about somewhere between 20 and 30 is when you can exist as a family unit. And then after about 30, it becomes unwieldy, and suddenly there's always there are too many people challenging for control of the group, because you've got families extending into. And so what he was looking for is, at what point were we perhaps forced, in order to feed ourselves, to stop and put down our roots? And really, it was all about food. And the one thing that putting down roots really was all about was agriculture.
Sure, and then that transformed our way of perceiving the world.
Everything. That's the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent grows out of agriculture. And so what I think you would love to do is to reverse the course of human history and take us back to that innocent time, which hey, we were much more in touch with ourselves.
I'm not wanting to do that.
I think it's a very attractive notion personally.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen. I mean, it's nice.
No. But there was something. My takeaway is there is something in that switchover that seems to make it harder for us to exist peacefully.
Well, yeah, and I think part of it I think social media has strengthened one of the flaws of the public sphere as we understand it, which is that people can be incredibly harsh with one another because you don't know who these people are. You're not connected to them in any other way. So you can attack them, you can vent, you can say whatever you want to say. And, without the consequences that you would have if you actually lived in the same house or village or community.
If you had to look them in the eye when you said that.
Exactly.
Knowing that they were then going to respond to you to your face.
Right. And so that's where, to me, that's what disturbs me is like because there's, one example, let's say Thanksgiving, and there's issues that need to be handled about Thanksgiving. And so suddenly certain people in families will no longer gather with their family for Thanksgiving because they don't agree with what they would say is the mythology or the whatever, racism or whatever that's inherent in that. So they're not going to meet with people. See, to me, that's you've got it twisted around. You're letting the public sphere determine how you live locally. And it should actually be the other way around. And I think that's the only way forward, is when we begin to really develop locally with multiple people that have different points of view, but we're developing relationships locally, developing our ideas locally. Then maybe we can inject some health back into the public sphere, which I mean, in my opinion, is completely unhinged at this point. It's just so disconnected from everyday life.
Can I point to a fly in the ointment?
Please. Yeah.
Now, the hope and the assumption is that in the private sphere, there is diversity, and so you're always understanding. There are a couple different points of view other than your own, but that's not always the case in this country. In fact, there are a lot of places in the country where, in fact, your public sphere is you looking at yourself. But again.
So does that mean that those of us that feel more enlightened than the others are going to set up laws to force other people to do that?
I'm simply saying now. Let me give you, for instance. Let me keep it tribal, so nobody has to feel badly about this, other than my tribe. Okay, I grew up as in what's called conservative Judaism, which is rather mainstream. Orthodox were really religious; they kept all the rules and the regulations. Conservatives in the middle, we kind of kept some, and forget the others. The Reform Jews, they might as well have gone to church as far as we were all concerned. All right. But I know I always looked at Hasids as being oddballs. Okay. I as a Jew, I looked at them and I thought, you're not like me. You're entirely different from me. I cannot relate to you. Your whole way of living is foreign to me. Your whole way of thinking is foreign to me. We are, in essence, the same, and yet I don't think you think of me as Jewish. And well, I'm quite certain you don't think of me as Jewish. I know for a fact you don't. I don't know how you did that, but so it is possible within even just a tribe to have issues.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a pure method. I'm just saying, since the public sphere is, because I mean, let's think about our public sphere discussion. We don't consider those tribal differences at that level, because really everybody in the US has to be on the red side or the blue side.
There is no middle ground right now. Absolutely. There's
no middle ground. But see, that's not accurate. The fact is, if you were to actually get to know people on all sides, you would find incredible variations in their beliefs.
Yeah, but we all, most of us do stand in the middle ground. We're just leaning toward those extremes right this second.
Right. But if you listen to our public sphere conversation, you would think, and I think this is where the diplomat from another country or an alien from another planet would listen to our public sphere discussion and would think, gosh, there's a bunch of people for Biden and there's a bunch of people for Trump, or there's a bunch of people that are for abortion at any time, and there are a bunch of people that want it always illegal for everybody, because that's kind of the way we talk about it. But that's not the reality on the ground of where people really are. But we're still arguing and amping up on the basis of these redrawing. It's like everybody has to fit in one of these two options, and there is no room for anybody that's in the middle. And that's the sickness. That's the illness that is fouling us up. And until we figure out how to talk differently in the public sphere with one another, we're not going to get anywhere. The only possible results are what you had suggested for our get together, which was we eventually become all red or all blue. Who's going to win?
Yep.
And I think that's why Supreme Court's decisions.
But that way, nobody has to win. Everybody's a winner. Don't you see?
Yeah, right. Nobody's, I mean, the thing is in that scenario, nobody wins in the long run. And that's why something's got to happen, or else we're driving toward a wall. Yes, and if we just keep doing this, where it's this way or this way, this way or this way, I'm afraid of you, I'm afraid of you, you're terrible, you're terrible. That's where we're going to hit the wall.
This is the perfect segue to what I think the top issue is.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Guns.
Sorry?
Guns. We can't communicate. I agree. And my question is to the guy holding the gun, why are you afraid of me? Why are you so afraid of me that when you go shopping, you need to be armed as if you feared I would attack you? Why do you feel compelled to own military style weapons that, hey, when certain people get their hands on, man, hey, why do I have to really look around in fear every time I'm in a public sphere for fear I might get shot? And that's not hyperbolic anymore. There's literally, you can't even go to church or synagogue. You can't go anywhere to not get shot. I understand there's no immediately solving our gun problem. There are 400 million guns.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you would solve that situation.
Well, actually, I do have a way. I have a way without, all right, I'm going to give two quick arguments, and then we'll bash away from there. First of all, do you know how many times the word own appears in the Second Amendment? Off the top of your head.
I would guess none, since just the context of our conversation.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, the word own does not appear anywhere in the Second Amendment. In essence, and when Antonin Scalia wrote his Heller decision, which everyone holds up as that's now the modern standard by which we judge our gun laws, his argument was you don't have to be a member of the militia to keep and bear firearms. If you read the entirety of Heller, you know what word's not there? Own. It's not there in Heller. He uses, in his summation, Scalia uses the word possess, which is awfully clever of him. Because if you go to Webster's and you look up the word own, you'll see possess as one of the definitions. It's not the definition of own, it's one of the definitions. And the problem is you can possess things that you do not own. The same is true for keep and bear. I can keep and bear a rental car, but when the contract is up and the rental car company says, give us back the car, regardless of how much I want to keep and bear it, it doesn't belong to me. In contract law, you cannot make keep, bear, or possess equal own. You can't do it. And that's why Antonin Scalia couldn't literally cross, couldn't make own. He couldn't use the word own in Heller because then he would first have had to explain why it wasn't there to begin with. The nature of what James Madison wrote in the Second Amendment, he prefaced it with the well-regulated militia. And this is very important to Scalia in Heller. And he says, yeah, it's about the militia, but you don't have to be a member of the militia to possess the gun. So the question of who owns the guns is still up in the air because there's no enumeration of individual ownership. It really is there for the militia. The inference is very clear. If I join the National Guard today, they wouldn't have me. I'm too old. But let's say I could convince them, have me. If I went, I'm not bringing a gun. the National Guard will give me a gun. That's the militia now. We call them the National Guard. They will give me a weapon. They will train me. There are lots of it's a well-regulated militia, the National Guard. And when my service is done, I will give them back the gun and go home gunless, because that's the deal. You don't own the guns, the militia does. All right. I think we've been having the wrong argument in this country the whole time. And I think Antonin Scalia, I went back and I looked to see, has anyone ever made this argument before? Where's the word own? As far as I can tell, no one has ever. It's like the emperor is naked. You know, the emperor doesn't own anything, is what I'm pointing out. The person who came closest is, ironically, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, very conservative, Warren Burger. And Burger argued after he left the bench that the Second Amendment is all about, he didn't point to the word own because I don't think he grokked that. But he pointed to the fact that there is no right to individual gun ownership in the Second Amendment. It's all about the well-regulated militia. So I'm simply agreeing with Warren Burger, and I'm saying it ain't about the militia. It's about the fact that there's a word missing that we all keep filling in, that maybe we're missing the point. Okay, that's my first argument. I think there's...
Well, and kudos on arguing your point in a way that I think would make constitutionalists listen and have to argue versus dismiss. I think that's a very strategic way to argue your point, because you're quoting and challenging people that would be constitutionalists to say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah.
If you want to be an original, hey, if you want to be an originalist, let's be original. The word own is not in the original. You need to explain that and tell me how you get to own.
I'd be really interested to hear what some legal minds would say about that. That's interesting.
My argument is all well and good. It could certainly crack a door and maybe change the way that we talk about guns. And I would argue, hey, let's stop calling them guns. That's a word that is kind of cute. They were designed from the ground up to solve a problem, and it's how to kill a living thing efficiently. Goes back to the 11th century in China. That's when the first use of gunpowder to force a metal ball to fly across distance to hit a living person and knock it down dead. The whole point is the efficiency of it. And a gun, hey, look, it's designed from the ground up to kill living things. A gun that kills a living thing has simply met its design specs. It did exactly what it was designed to do. You can't complain about the gun. I think the problem is what we call it. A thing designed to kill things should be called what it is, a death machine. And I think if we just call them death machines instead of guns, then we would talk about, responsible death machine ownership, which I think sounds a little closer to the mark, because
I hear your point. Yeah. That one though. Yeah.
I just want to look. I just
probably wouldn't even get out the door with that one, but I hear.
I just want everyone to be honest. Oh, okay. That was an argument off to the side.
I get it. Yeah.
All right. The other argument. Oh God, it just went out of my head. All right. The guns. Okay.
Well, just with the term guns, I mean, that the issue itself is important, what we call things, because you see that even in even in the abortion debate with pro-choice or with pro-life, those are intentionally chosen words to try to focus the issue. So words matter, language matters. Yes. So the idea of guns, that matters.
I still can't get the guns off the street. That's not going to make that happen anytime soon. But I do have an idea for how we do that.
Okay.
All right. Your car was not designed to kill anybody. It was designed from the ground up to get people from point A to point B. Now, it so happens that cars, when driven, accidents can happen and people can drive irresponsibly. They can do terrible bodily harm. They can do property damage. They can kill people. And that's why we now have laws in every single state where if you're going to drive a car, you are obligated to get liability insurance in case you do anything really dangerous.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Now, guns being death machines. Literally, that's what they were designed to do. You'll get the argument when you go into Twitter and you make gun arguments. They'll say, "Well, cars kill people too." Yeah, but the car wasn't designed to do that. That was an accident. That's why there's liability insurance. The gun was literally designed to do the thing. Hey, like I said, a gun that killed somebody. Hey, mission accomplished. And I mean that in all. Really, that's what you bought it to do. That's what it did. Congratulations. Yeah. Well, that being the case, then everyone should be responsible for the carnage, the death, the destruction that comes out the business end of their death machine. I think that is a way to begin to separate the chaff from the wheat. Because, yeah, all right, you want to spend, hey, that kid who ponied up $1,500 to buy the semi-automatic weapon that he I forget who shot up, what was it, Buffalo? He had $1,500 to spare. How about a few more dollars for some insurance? Now, it's a semi-automatic. So it's a semi-automatic. So I would let me approach it this way. You know who would love to go along with what I'm saying, with what I'm thinking? In fact, they kill. It's the insurance industry.
No kidding.
Yeah. Hey, the insurance industry can already tell us, they've already got all the data covered as to really where all the risk is, where all the risk management would be.
I'm kind of surprised there isn't some kind of gun
we've tried, and it's beginning to happen now. Here in California, up North California. I forget which place in California. There's a city ordinance that everyone within city limits who possesses a gun must buy liability insurance for it.
Okay.
It's already beginning to happen. And that, hey, I think I would let the insurance industry, we let them run ragged over our health care. I say, let them do the exact same thing to guns.
That's intriguing. It makes me want to just even kind of look back at insurance, how it developed, what it developed with, and then
it's risk management. But all insurance is risk management.
Right. And I mean, that's why it's so fascinating.
Yes.
That if your idea is interesting, and it's kind of like, why hasn't that already? You would think that would have already happened.
There has been resistance to it, but I think the time has come to revisit it. And hey, if you want to have all these guns, you're going to have to insure each and every one of them, and you have to renew that insurance every year. And I think that is how we get people to turn in their guns, because they cannot afford to insure them. It's not fascism at work, it's commerce. The American way. Problem solved. Thank you, ladies and germs. I'll be here all week. Tell your friends. So that is my big problem. But hey, I walked in the door with a possible answer.
Yeah, right. No, and again, I really like the first argument, because you're using the authoritative basis for the quote other side to argue it. And see, that's the stuff that to me is missing from a lot of our public sphere conversations is that kind of thing, is kind of saying, okay, what are the reasons for which you hold your belief that's counter to mine? And then say, okay, now let me work with that and say, hey, what about this, this, and this? Because that makes the conversation way more interesting than two people just yelling at each other about different.
God, hey, yeah. Look, I'm putting forward ideas. How do we solve the problem? Yes, no arguments are of no interest whatsoever. They're boring and not fun to be part of. But hey, what if we try and answer? And if someone says, that's interesting, if we do this, then it's like an improv. It's yes and we can actually then suddenly we're helping solve the problem together.
Yeah, yeah.
But we got to start with, you know, all right, hey, what if? And on that bombshell, we've found a way to communicate.
Yes, and we've solved the problems of our society. I mean, I'm not really sure we have any other reason to have a podcast, but I am excited about some potential future guests and some future discussions we have here. And
yes, we'll give a little tease. We have a few guests coming up in the next couple of weeks that are very, very exciting, which will take us in some interesting directions. Stay tuned, everybody. And hey, thanks for listening.
Thanks for being with us. Yeah.
We'll see you next time.